topic's a little more depressing than that. It's gentrification, and I'm going to focus on Philadelphia. And I chose this topic because we had to read Jonathan Franzen for the Michigan One program, which one of the topics they discussed was gentrification. So in this PubSpeak, I'm going to talk about what gentrification is, what it looks like in a city, an example of a positive gentrification, and an example of a negative gentrification, and a closer look at gentrification in Philadelphia, and specifically this neighborhood called Northern Liberties, and finally why I think gentrification is really bad. So gentrification in its simplest form is basically when a middle or upper class moves into a lower and working class neighborhood, one that's not necessarily has high class restaurants or anything like that. It's falling apart, that kind of thing, and they come in and they change everything, they open new stores, they fix things up and things like that. And as the incomes increase in the neighborhood and the family size decreases in the neighborhood, the rent, housing, property taxes, the prices of almost everything go up. And then the old community can't afford to live there anymore because it's so expensive. And the new community comes in and changes everything. They open new stores, they open restaurants, organic food stores, and everyone has to find a new place to live because they can't afford to live. Which is the characters Patty and Walter from Freedom. They move into this neighborhood in a Midwestern town that isn't a really good neighborhood, and as time goes on, it becomes a middle class, family-oriented neighborhood. So, for clarification, Philadelphia is not the worst place for gentrification. It's bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. There are other places where it's much worse, LA has really bad gentrification, and the one I'm going to talk about now is Washington, D.C. And in the 1990s, Washington, D.C. had a really bad violence peak. In 1992, there were 500 murders in 1 year in Washington, D.C., and it became known as the murder capital of the country. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, the city purposely began to gentrify the city because a lot of people moved out because it was so dangerous, and they moved to Maryland and Virginia in the suburbs. And so they wanted people to come back in the city to bring more money and make it seem nicer than it is. And so violence in one part of the city went down, and then violence in another part of the city went up really badly. In 2006, there was an average of 11 robberies a day in Washington, D.C. And so between November of 2004 and November of 2006, murders became more concentrated in different neighborhoods where lower class people had to move because the pricing went up so much. And they gentrified areas around the White House and stuff, really high tourism areas, to make it seem more fun to go to. And so now I'm going to talk about Philadelphia's gentrification, and specifically this neighborhood called Northern Liberties. And it was one of the first neighborhoods ever in Philadelphia, and it was a really affluent neighborhood when it first came to be. The houses are huge, 3 floors, up to 24 rooms, and they had servant quarters behind them. Yeah, I know, it's kind of creepy. But, and in the 1900s and the early 2000s, it shifted to a place where immigrants, African Americans, and Latino Americans would live, and they would live together in not a really bad neighborhood, but not a great neighborhood either. So on your visual little map, you can see Northern Liberties is in the northeastern section of the city, on the top right part, and it's a pretty small neighborhood, but the neighborhood just above it, Fishtown, is the beginning of North Philadelphia, and as an example to tell you how bad North Philadelphia is, the TV show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Has anyone not seen it? Or doesn't know what it's about?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, it's about this kid who grows up in West Philadelphia, and it's a really dangerous neighborhood, and so his mom sends him to California, to a better place to get away from the violence of the city. Well, if West Philadelphia is really bad, North Philadelphia is 6 times worse. And people are just crazy in North Philadelphia. You don't go if you don't know where you're going, or you're with someone who knows the neighborhood really well. People aren't And so I'm going to use examples from 2002, 2005, and then 2009 and 10, because that's like the times that I lived in Northern Liberties and like saw the change. So in 2002, when I lived there, you could tell that there was like some change happening. Like before, the neighborhood was really like working and lower class. Like it was a nice mixture of people. Like my neighbor was from, or she was from Yugoslavia, and then another neighbor was from like Russia or something like that. And in 2002, like we started noticing more working professionals and artists and designers and developers were starting to move into the neighborhood. And at first it was really nice. It was like more diversity, you know, different variety of people. Like you could talk to someone about art and then talk to someone else about where they came from. And everyone was just living cohesively. And then in about 2005, there was a bigger shift where new restaurants were opening and new stores and things were being rebuilt. And then in 2009, it was totally different than it was before. Okay, so more people who were wealthier were moving in and lower class was moving out. And to give you a sense of the change that happened, on the graph that you have, the top line, it's hard to tell the difference, but the top line is the neighborhood of Northern Liberties and part of Fishtown, and the bottom line is the average house prices in Philadelphia. And you can tell that there's a really big difference. For example, in January 2000, you could buy like a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3-room house with like a basement for $56,000. And then in January 2001, prices began to go up. And before the recession, in around January 2006, the prices of houses peaked to $385,000. And then in January of 2009 to about June 2009, it was about $301,000. And a $245,000 difference in the average price of houses is a really big deal for a lot of people. And compared with the rest of the city, which is the bottom line, it's a really big difference. So now I'm going to give you a picture of what Northern Liberties is like today. Like it used to be really diverse and really interesting, and now you like walk up 2nd Street, which is the main street of the neighborhood, and like the first thing you notice are the people. It's like guys in flannel shirts and skinny jeans with like beards in the middle of summer and all these crazy things, and like girls with non-prescription glasses and high-waisted shorts and stuff. And it's like hipsters are everywhere. Like, people have started to call it Hipsterville instead of Northern Liberties. And as the number of hipsters increases, you know you're getting closer to the center of the Texas neighborhood. So there's like this store that sells crafts for like really ridiculous sums of money, and like upscale boutiques and expensive restaurants, and of course a record store and organic food stores and stuff. And then you get to this thing called the Piazza, which is the new focal point of the neighborhood. And 5 years ago, it was like this abandoned lot in the middle of the neighborhood that was just sitting. And then this developer, Bart Blackstein, who's the biggest developer in Philadelphia, he buys things all around the city and like changes it into like lofts and condos, built this 100,000 square foot space that has like an apartment building with 550 apartments, restaurants, gallery spaces, and things like that. And there's a lot of really good things that came out of it, like the new development and the restaurants and the community interacting with each other. Like they have dance parties every Sunday with like different like well-known DJs doing things, and baseball games because they have like the biggest LCD television in the whole city, something like that. And it's really good because the income of the neighborhood went up, which means more money went to the city, which is really good. But there are also a lot of really bad things about the gentrification that's happened. So the first thing is that Northern Liberties is now an exceptionally exclusive city or neighborhood, and like the hipsters didn't only push out the former residents, but also the new stores are so expensive that the people who could stay can't afford to shop at them. Like for example, there's this organic food store that's for people who are conscientious of the environment, as they say, and like want to eat healthier, you know, and people who don't shop there aren't as good. And the Northern Liberties Neighborhood Association, which is a very new organization and has only certain people in the neighborhood neighborhood there prevents chain stores from opening in the area and like grocery stores and stuff. So it's like you either go to the organic food store or you have to go all the way to the grocery store out of the neighborhood to get shopping and stuff, which isn't encouraging for people who want to stay in the neighborhood. And one may say that it's better, organic food's better for you and like better for the environment, but if you can't afford it, you shouldn't be punished for that. Another problem that's a really big deal are the tensions between the middle class and the lower working class who is forced out of the neighborhood. Like the lower class are kind of angry that they were forced out of the neighborhood, which is understandable. But you know, some of the violence that happens isn't good. But a lot of residents of North Liberty dismiss the entire rest of like the neighborhood. Like if people are coming in that they don't want there, it's not a good thing for them. So like they don't take into account that it's a city still, and it's still North Philadelphia, which is really dangerous. And even though they're in like their bubble as they see it, things still filter in. Like one woman was murdered, and she was raped and murdered when she was entering her house, and it was really horrible when it happened. Like we all knew who she was, and like she was really nice, and she really didn't deserve what happened to her. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and she was drunk and on a bicycle, and it's really hard to, it's like you're in a city, you have to use some common sense about what's going on, and kind of like flaunting your really cool lifestyle to people isn't necessarily a good thing, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning, and going home isn't a good thing either. And the state of the neighborhood is ignored. Like the piazza was developed, but then like a block away, there's an abandoned warehouse with like a forest growing in it. There's like weeds that are so high, and like it's being ignored and nothing's been done about it. Another problem is the prejudices against African Americans and Latino Americans when they go to the neighborhood. Like my really close friend, her dad is a police officer, and he says that the number of calls that they get reporting suspicious activity when like Black people or Mexican people come into the neighborhood and they're like shopping is like ridiculous. Like they're always calling, like there's someone here who's not supposed to be here, can you come check it out? And it's just someone who wants to go buy something. It's kind of ridiculous. And all this is causing the city to become more and more segregated. So the city is supposed to be like a community rather than a place where people just tolerate and reject each other from their neighborhoods. And on your visual map thing, I marked the center of the city with a circle, and all of the neighborhoods except Chinatown around this center have been gentrified, which means that all of the lower class and working class people are moving towards the outskirts of the city and are becoming more and more disconnected from what's going on in the city, and they're feeling less and less welcome in the city, which is a really big deal because it's supposed to be like a place of brotherly love or whatever. And I don't want you guys to think that gentrification is all bad, because it's not. There are some places where it's been really good for our community. For example, in recent years, gentrification has been really good in New Orleans. Like before Hurricane Katrina, segregation between classes and ethnicities was really bad. Like it was Black people live here, white people live here, and things like that. And after Katrina, people have started to come together to rebuild the city, and it's been higher classes of people, like even celebrities like Brad Pitt, those houses in Katrina in New Orleans, like they're coming in to help rebuild the neighborhood, which is really good. And people were skeptical at first, thinking it was like a charity thing, but the people are living there now, so it's becoming a new community and giving like hope for the future. So, in conclusion, gentrification, especially in Philadelphia, is a really important problem with no feasible solution. Like Northern Liberties is not the only place where this is happening. There's another neighborhood from Graduate Hospital where gentrification is really bad. Like in the past 6 years, 4,000 African Americans have moved out of the Graduate Hospital neighborhood because they could no longer afford it. And there's an area in North Philadelphia where Temple University is, where they like segregate the university campus, and they have police officers on like the perimeter of the campus to keep everyone out and like everyone out of the neighborhood, and they're trying to force people out of their homes so that they can build things for students. And I think that getting back to a place of community, which is what Philadelphia wants right now, people have to address the issue, because people like dancing around it, not really talking about it, but because they don't feel comfortable talking about it, but it really needs to be talked about and dealt with. And I think it's a really big problem when the middle class and the lower class residents of a neighborhood, the only place they interact is at a liquor store. Like, I think that's really, really bad. So, yeah.
Do you ever see something like reverse gentrification happen?
Yeah, like people try and gentrify the neighborhood Fishtown, which is right above Northern Liberties, and like they're trying to move in and stuff, and people who are like the neighbors try and pressure them to leave by like intimidation. Like it's really crazy. It's both sides are at fault, and it's just a problem that has to be addressed from both sides.
You may have said this, but I was just wondering what neighborhood you live in.
What I live in now? Well, all right. I lived in Northern Liberties, and then we moved to Old City, and then South Philadelphia, and now we live in the Art Museum area. So we've lived kind of everywhere in the city. Yeah.
I feel I'm talking to Ben. It's a wonderful place. But seriously, I'm just wondering, like in the 50s, there was, white flight.
Yeah.
The suburbanites, they headed out of the center city. Is that reversing now, or, white upper-class families moving back to center city?
Yeah, a lot of people will consider it the reverse of white flight, like people from the suburbs moving back into the city. But now they want to keep them in the city instead of like leaving again when their kids grow up and get older, which is why people left the city in the first place. And population was a really big problem in Philadelphia until this gentrification started happening. So it's kind of like hard. Like, do you want people to move back in or stay out?
So, like, you're basically saying a group of people are coming into a neighborhood and almost like hijacking it.
Yeah.
So, where do they go if they don't go to Northern Liberties, right? Do they just congregate in another area and the same sort of like segregation?
You mean the hipsters? Where do the hipsters
No,
go?
like
What do we do? What do we do with the hipsters?
Why hating on hipsters? I don't understand. Right. So if they don't go to Northern Liberties, where do they go?
Like the people who lived there before?
No. People who are gentrifying these areas.
What do you mean?
If they don't move to Northern Liberties,
Oh,
where
like
do
the
they
other
move?
neighborhoods where they moved to?
Yeah, if they're not moving anywhere and they all live in the same place, how is that not also a sort of segregation, de facto segregation?
I mean, it is a form of segregation, and I mean, it's weird because like the hipsters moved to Northern Liberties, the upper class white people stereotypically moved to like this neighborhood called Rittenhouse Square. It's like everyone has their place to go, and a lot of people don't leave their neighborhood very much except to like work. It's really weird. Like you walk into one neighborhood and you see the hipsters, and then you leave and you see another people, and then you leave, and it used to be like really mixed up, and it's really sad. Did I answer your question?
Not really.
What are you asking?
I mean, my question is right, if you don't gentrify, it seems that these people who want to gentrify and things like that, they just live in another neighborhood altogether. I don't know, I've lived in DC, Northern Virginia, which is very developed cities, things like that, and I've never seen this mixed sort of upper class, lower class, completely peaceful mix that you're addressing. It's always, if they don't gentrify DC, they move to a suburb and they're completely homogenous there. I don't understand why gentrification is bad if the alternative is still no mixture and things like that.
No, I think the alternative is mixture. Like in 2002, when people were living together, it was really nice. Everyone would be eating together, talking together, and now they just avoid each other and they don't talk to each other and they call the cops on people when they come into their neighborhood. So I think that a way to get back to a community is to have a lot of people living together in a neighborhood rather than moving to one neighborhood and then feeling like you have to move to another neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get what you're saying about gentrification being bad and all, and I agree with you. And there's a part of Nashville that's gentrified, and we've had some of the same issues, kind of. But what I wanted to know is, you said that there used to be like a really mixed community, and that sounds really cool. But I was wondering how, if part of the problem is economics, like too many upper class families, meaning lower class families can't afford it. How did that work economically? Like with upper class and lower class in the same spot. How did like house prices and like property taxes work?
In like 2002, when it started to become gentrified, it was still a nicer neighborhood part of North Philly, but when they started opening like restaurants and it became like a hot spot, that's when like it became more and more expensive. Like they opened a restaurant, Honey's, that became like the brunch place to go to every week, and like people would start going, and all these other places that would open. So before it was mixed, and it was interesting to see like the mixture of people, and it wasn't too expensive to live there either. Yeah, I don't understand why it's so expensive now, because it's not as nicer.
So this is a serious question. What do hipsters do for a living? Because I'm
What do they
wondering.
do for a living?
Yeah, because what I'm wondering is like, is in the case of Northern Liberty, is it that they're like racist and it's working in their not so good racist favor, or is it that they somehow collectively have more money and can gentrify that way?
Hipsters. It's weird. A lot of the hipsters in the neighborhood are like 35. So they're like old hipsters, so they're not even like young and cool. They're old. And so a lot of them are artists and like graphic designers and stuff like that. Like a lot of them work from their home. And like I've not met one person in Northern Liberty who works in an office. Or like
That's not underground.
So I'm guessing because like the city of Philadelphia always wants to raise its land values and stuff, it's on the side of gentrification. But has the city undergone any efforts to improve the conditions in places like Fishtown and like Graduate Hospital?
Not really. Like what Philadelphia has done to help people like lower classes, like they got rid of the projects, as they call it. There are these old, really high-rise apartment buildings that like a lot of lower class people would move into. And when they got rid of those, they built nicer places in like various parts of the city so that it would be more diverse. But now it's kind of like they're trying to like keep the reverse of white flight going, and they're trying to force people out of their neighborhoods now so that more like, I guess, desirable people would live in the neighborhoods. It's a really hard thing for them to deal with because they don't want to talk about it at all. So, yeah. Is there what?
Is there like a direct incentive for like rich people to move in? It's like at first conditions aren't that great. Still a lot of rich people moving in. Is there a reason for that?
Some of the incentive, I guess, would be cheap houses that you can make nicer. That's a really popular one. Some people think that it's kind of like white guilt, like feeling like they moved out of the city and they feel guilty about it now. I don't agree with that at all. I think that it's just like cheap in a nice neighborhood and trying to come back to the city without being in the city, so they can say like, oh, I live in North Philly. Like I've heard people say that before, like it's cool.
Okay, so this is sort of like a non-serious question, but you know how hipsters are always searching for non-conformity, right? So this looks like conformity. It's all going and congregating in Northern Liberties. Don't you think that by that, like, logic, eventually they'll get tired of Northern Liberties and all the people that were displaced will come back and they'll just find another place?
They are getting tired of Northern Liberty. They are. Now they're moving to Fishtown. Like wherever you see like new concert venues opening and like new bars and stuff, that's where the hipsters are going. And it's really bad because now they have like really expensive houses in Northern Liberties that people are moving out of to go to Fishtown, which is worse. I don't understand why. So it's kind of like a weird problem. Yeah.
This isn't exactly a question, but I think it'll add to the discussion. My mom was sort of not a hipster, but she was a dancer and an artist. When she had like a loft in Tribeca when it was just like really this industrial kind of bad neighborhood. And I feel like what it kind of goes on is that you first get the hipsters, the artists, or the cool people, not the rich people who come in, and then once they've sort of made it safe or made it a cool place, then the rich people come in. So I feel like gentrification is like often a two-step process. So the thing is that saying, oh, the hipsters are starting to leave North Liberties is not necessarily good news, because it just means that now the rich people will start, the more conventional rich people will start to move in, if my theory is correct.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Like people are starting to move into North Liberties now because it's a nice neighborhood. But a lot of people who are really wealthy who moved to Philadelphia moved to like closer towards the center of the city and like live in Rittenhouse Park, which is a really like wealthy area, or Washington Square, which is really wealthy. And I think a lot of the like artists who don't have a lot of money, like hipsters, living off their parents. I don't understand how they have so much money. But like the artists live in like South Philadelphia, and that's where you can like see more really interesting and diverse people from different places. Like I think South Philadelphia is an area where gentrification kind of happened, but it wasn't so bad. So it's like a mix of people who live there from their Italian relatives and people who have moved in recently. And Jay.
The government or like the local authority, do they like encourage rich people or like more?
The government, do they encourage them? Yes, they definitely. Like they encourage people to move back to the city because it's safer and it's a safe neighborhood, when it's not really a safe neighborhood. And like they encourage people to move back so that they can like collect money on them, or one of the main incentives is to get them into public schools, which a lot of people don't do. Like a lot of people send their kids to private schools, which also harms the neighborhood because there'll be less kids going to the public schools, so it'll become less important and less